County Sheriff's Office, joining us here tonight. And Wayne, I think, let me say Colonel. We respect that rank.
Wayne.
Okay, all right. First of all, most of Henry County doesn't understand all that's going on with the Henry County Sheriff's Office, and I know you kind of been living it in real time with all these changes.
Yes, sir.
So if you can, just tell the audience what is going on, because the current sheriff will be stepping down in July 1st, right?
His last day will be June 30th.
Okay. All right. So July 1st will be your first day.
At midnight, July 1st.
Oh, wow. So tell me what's going on. Explain that to me.
So Sheriff Perry's been served many terms at the sheriff's office, and he said he'd been praying about seeking another term, which would have been this year. And so employees have supported him in his decisions, and we believed that he was going to seek another term through his actions. He continued to work hard and reach out to people and continue making his contacts. And then last week he came in, I believe it was Tuesday.
Did you have any idea what was going on?
I had no idea it was coming.
Okay, all right.
He said he'd been praying and he sought an answer from the Lord, and he got the answer he was looking for, and he would not be seeking re-election this term.
Right. How did he tell you?
He called myself and then the lieutenant colonel of the office Mr. Eric Harrison. He just told us that he had found his answer and he wouldn't be seeking re-election this term.
Right. Well, I got to ask you, I mean, didn't you have to have a lump in your throat?
Yeah, it was a little shocking.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we decided who was going to run. At first, Mr. Eric Harrison had indicated to the sheriff that he was interested in running.
Okay. What position is he?
He is the lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
So he's currently the number 3 rank.
All right. Steve Eanes just retired, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Who was in second?
So after Steve Eanes retired,
okay,
Sheriff Perry promoted Eric Harrison to the number 2 position, would have been the chief deputy.
Right.
And so he decided that he would not seek the office. He did not want to run. So he stepped back to the number 3 position and allowed me to be promoted to chief deputy so I could seek the office this term.
Okay. All right. I want to ask our producers, is everything working live and everything as far as we know? Okay, I got you. All right. So I'm still trying to figure out what that was like. I mean, what was that like at the sheriff's office that day?
It was stressful for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've spent 23 years there, and I got many more years in me, and I look forward to serving them out there at the Henry County Sheriff's Office. And
right.
To see a long-term incumbent leave created some anxiety.
Oh yeah. And Sheriff Perry, how long has he been there?
He's going on about 30 years total service, but sheriff for going on 17 years, I do believe. Right.
Because one of the great advantages of working for the state or working for government is the retirement.
It is.
Yeah. He's going to have it nice. I mean, I think that's the coolest thing about working in government is that retirement.
It is. It's a great benefit, and it's actually one of the things that attracted me to the job initially was the benefits package. That's something I hadn't seen a lot of in my family.
I got you. All right. So at first you had to make up 100% in your mind you're ready for this, right?
Well, I've been talking to the sheriff about running for sheriff when he was done since dating back to 2016. When I was promoted to captain, I started contemplating a run for sheriff whenever he left. I did not know it was coming this year.
Right.
But it had been in my long-term plans.
I got you. Why do you want to be sheriff?
Well, I enjoy serving the citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I've been here for 23 years, and I think first that anyone who desires to be the sheriff should know the role of a sheriff. The sheriff serves under the executive branch of government. He is charged with carrying out existing laws. The sheriff is elected by the people and for the people and is answerable to the people only.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big responsibility.
Right. To me, it's like too much. Did you have any second thoughts about it, or is this 100% in your head you want to do this?
I've not had any second thoughts about it.
Okay.
I've never backed down from a challenge, and I'm not going to back down from this one.
Right. No, I've heard John Castle say, he says, thing about Wayne, he's hot-headed. Have you heard that one?
I have heard that one. I think he called in on your show and made that comment.
Yeah. Is that fair? Is that a fair?
I don't think so.
Right.
When John and I worked on a shift together, I was patrol sergeant, and I would say I was certainly ambitious and believed in aggressive, proactive law enforcement.
Right.
I'm not sure where the hot-headed term would come from.
Right.
I've never been classified by that. But
how about passionate?
Most certainly.
Okay. All right. Well, one of the things we've watched, and I've watched this ever since COVID, and is the nation is turned on law enforcement a little bit. And what's your thoughts on that?
So I think as a nation, we've probably seen that across the country, but here locally, we've not experienced those problems like they have across the country. The community here has been supportive of us. We've not experienced protests or things of that nature here locally, so we've not had it really bad here. We still have a supportive community of our law enforcement here locally.
Right. But I myself have seen a downgrade of a bit of the way people act. I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking about the way the citizens act. The first time I saw it was at El Retino, where the truth is the police showing up saved the night. But at the same time, people that didn't know what was going on was screaming at law enforcement, like, give us answers and that kind of thing. And nobody really didn't have any answers that night.
Right.
I had that same experience when I was over at the North Gardens the other night. You guys, and you guys did a great job of trying to help me. It was good. But it was kind of like disrespect for mankind as I was right there watching that. I remember some guy yelling out, "I'm gonna burn this town down." And in law enforcement, when somebody says that, you got to pay attention, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, it's the mindset of what's going on out there, and you got to be aware of that all the time. And I can't think of a tougher time to be sheriff.
So it is a tough time in society to
Yeah.
be a law enforcement officer in general, much less a law enforcement leader.
Right.
And there are portions of society who don't respect the law and law enforcement, and they would wish for
A bad outcome, right?
Yeah, they would ask for
I
anarchy.
saw that.
But anarchy would be no good for anyone here.
Sure.
The rule of law is essential to keep every citizen, yourself and every other one, safe, and that's our duty.
Right. But I think going into this, it's probably the toughest time ever to be a sheriff.
It is a very tough time.
Right.
But I have a few things going for me. One, as you said, I'm passionate, but I also have energy and drive, and I look forward to
How old are you?
I'm 44 years old.
Okay. And most of the people that run for sheriff have been older than that, haven't they?
I've really not studied the age of sheriff's candidates here in Henry County.
Right. Well, do you think young's is a good thing?
I think so. Like I said, I've been here 23 years. I started when I was 21 years old.
Right.
I've dedicated my life to this office and this community. And so I think my age gives me a couple of years where I'm still really passionate, and I have a lot of energy and drive left in me.
Your opponent was talking, he says he thinks that, he wants all of his law enforcement folks to be fit. How do you feel about that?
I think physical fitness is certainly a vital part. It's been scientifically proven, and I have the studies. In fact, I'm actually working on something for that I'll be releasing in the coming months.
Right.
But it contributes to less injuries, better overall fitness, reduced insurance premiums for the county.
Right.
They don't use sick time as frequently, and they just provide a professional image to the community when they look good in uniform. I'm a big proponent of squared away uniforms.
All right. And what does that mean?
Just looking good, keeping your
Sharp.
uniform fitting appropriately, keeping your brass squared away, your badge and your insignias. And I'm a big proponent of our deputies looking professional.
Will that be written down in a rule book, or how will you handle that?
So we do have policy on that, but it's up to frontline supervisors to enforce those type of things.
All right. So you want a fit force?
I would like one.
Right. Okay.
And not saying that we don't have one.
Right.
Myself included. There's always room for improvement.
Gotcha. All right. Have you come up with a platform? I gave you, it's just been a week, but are you working on, your focus, your future?
So one advantage I have, unlike any candidate could enter this race, I have a first-hand perspective of what can and can't be done. And I'm not going to come up with a candidate platform and sell anyone a bill of goods or make false promises for a vote. So I have my own ideals of how I'm going to move this sheriff's office forward, And again, being in a unique position, I don't have to wait until elected to move forward.
We can see it.
I went to work last week.
Okay. So we're going to be able to see this. Is that your kind of your vision? Is that we watch you?
In the coming months, you will see some transitions in the sheriff's office. And you spoke of fitness. I have some plans in place for that. It will be going into place in the very near future.
Right. Right. All right. Ray Reynolds called up during the 4 o'clock show, and he might call in tonight. But he says that he has been bombarded by a lot of thefts, and he told me, I don't want to quote him, but I think he said that he didn't feel like that you guys have talked to the guy that's so easy to identify. Do you have any response to that?
I'm not particularly familiar with the case Ray is talking about specifically. I'd be glad to talk with Ray. If he feels like his case has not been worked with the attention it deserves, I'd remind people that these deputies work thousands of cases a year, and they answer over 40,000 calls for service on average annually.
Right.
So their workload can get quite backed up.
Are y'all having problems hiring deputies right now too, like everybody else is?
Sure. Every agency across this nation has recruitment and retention issues right now.
What are you going to do to deal with that?
So I'm working on, the Board of Supervisors has initiated a pay study. We hope to see the results of that soon.
Right.
So we hope the pay study will up that and improving morale inside the agency, working with our first line supervisors, bringing the deputies programs such as fitness programs and possibly even fitness incentives. All those things work to improve morale.
I did remember, I wasn't there, but I saw the coverage on it. Some of the supervisors were a little intimidated. Maybe it was a year ago. I can't help me.
Thereabouts, yeah.
I think some of the police or some of the officers came. They had the guns and holsters, and some of the supervisors felt a little threatened because they felt like that they were reaching out because they've had to deal with the jail and all these things, and we were talking about like a 12% increase. And that kind of thing, and they felt like they'd done it while they could, and it wasn't you. Fair enough. This is the sheriff, but I think some of them felt intimidated. Bill Wyatt said he was scared in an editorial.
Well, I will say there would have been no reason for anyone who was there to have been scared. Those deputies were just there to support the sheriff in his efforts to get them a pay raise and better pay, and there was no intent to intimidate anyone. I hate that it was perceived in that manner,
right?
But that was not the intention. Those deputies just wanted to be there and be part of their local governmental process.
How would you handle it if you were sheriff?
As far as
how would you have done that?
I would support deputies appearing before any board of supervisors meeting. In fact, I wish they would do it more often, just to be part of the local governmental process.
To watch the process.
To watch the process, yes, sir.
I got you. But can you understand why some people can think this is too much? I mean, because politicians, I've studied this over the years, they don't like to look bad. No politician likes to look bad. And so it's like to the citizens that looks bad that they aren't respecting officers and paying them well. Because I think one of the things that they came out with, they showed that officer pay was somewhere in the middle. That we weren't maybe the best in the pay, but we were in the middle of the game. Is that accurate?
I don't think we will really know until we see the true results of this pay study that was contracted.
When do we get that? When do we get that?
I do not know. I was told maybe as early as April or May.
Okay. So that might be one of the first issues we get to see you kind of have to resolve.
So, of course, I'd like to see the results of the pay study and work with the board to see how we can implement it as fit. At the end of the day, there are only so many dollars to work with, and we have to see where those dollars are best spent.
Right. I know your opponent. I could see one of his big issues is going to be that jail.
Okay.
Because even before the jail was built, people were saying we were spending too much money on it. And Ray Reynolds, he sings that he'll say a different figure all the time, but it's how much does the jail cost?
Somewhere around $70 million. I don't have the exact dollar figure.
Right. Now I've heard supervisors say, "Now wait a minute, $20,000 got paid from state funding on it, so it wasn't all local money." 25%, right?
Yeah. Once the adult detention center was completed and it met all the requirements of the Virginia Department of Corrections, then they began a reimbursement process for 25% of the total cost.
Right. I think your opponent says he doesn't think you have much experience running a jail. What would be your response to that?
As far as running the jail, I have never worked inside of the correctional environment. I've been a career-long law enforcement officer. I've been on the law enforcement side of the sheriff's office the entire time. But one advantage I do have is I have been inside the new jail. I have spent 7 years of my career conducting internal affairs investigations.
Wow.
So I understand the policies, procedures, and the day-to-day operations of the correctional facility well.
Right.
I had to learn those as part of my internal affairs duties.
All right.
And so I have been in and out of the new jail, and in fact, since finding this out last week, I've been down there numerous times. I intend to know what every one of those deputies inside does. You cannot be the sheriff unless you understand the role of every one of your deputies.
All right, let me ask you. I'd like to do a whole show on the jail with you about what you've learned about it. I think it's too early to quiz you on this right now because you got to find out more about it.
Well, I feel like we're on pretty even playing ground as far as the adult detention center goes.
Okay. All right.
Because no candidate in this race has worked inside the walls of that and done rounds, and no candidate in this race has even worked in a facility of that size.
Right. Some people think it's too big.
I wasn't part of the jail construction.
Okay.
It is a physically large building. So
Right.
there was a formula that was in place for that, where the Department of Corrections required so many square feet per housable inmate, and that's how it grew to the size that it is.
All right. One thing we were told, and I watched this process, that we could get inmates from out of the area that would come here.
Yes, sir.
Is that something that you're going to try to? Because from what I learned, or what I'm learning, I don't have all the best sources on this right now, but that we're not housing any more prisoners than we were before we built the place. Is that correct, or?
That is correct, but there are some issues associated with that most people are not aware of.
All right, tell me about that.
One of those is COVID.
Okay, all right.
COVID kind of changed the direction and plans for that. When the General Assembly changed bail and bond reforms, many more people are getting out on bond that they would not have gotten out of jail before.
Mm-hmm.
The Department of Corrections, last year Governor Youngkin upped the daily per diem in which they pay local jails for housing inmates that have been sentenced to DOC.
Right.
So when that happened, DOC started taking more inmates. Looking back all the way to almost 2017, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I looked at these numbers last week. Department of Corrections had been taking 25-ish inmates on average annually and putting them in DOC facilities. But in 2020 alone, it went to over 100 inmates were taken from our jail and moved into DOC facilities.
And why is that again? Because the governor's offering more money?
Because the state will now pay the local jail more money per day to house them.
Okay.
So it actually saves the state money overall for DOC to go ahead and house them in the DOC facility.
Okay.
Anyone who's sentenced to over 1 year in prison then becomes a DOC inmate, Department of Corrections inmate. And so previously it's just been, we hold them until Department of Corrections has room. Well, they now have more room and are taking more inmates from the jail.
Mm-hmm. All right. It's not easy to, on the first go, to pick up on all this. All right. When do you expect us to be able to make good on the new men that we've gotten for the jail, and start paying that, start making some money with that jail? How about that?
Well, we just had it approved last week. We're finalizing the contract where we can now begin housing federal inmates, and that's a pretty good per diem per day that will bring some money back in. I'm not saying that's the fix, but that was just approved last week.
All right. And are we accredited yet?
So the Sheriff's Office is an accredited agency.
Is?
It is.
Okay.
The jail accreditation is a totally separate issue.
Okay.
That I'm going to pursue.
All right. How long will that take?
I don't know. We're in the very beginning phases of even discussing that.
Gotcha. Isn't that don't you have to have that to get inmates from everywhere else?
No, not necessarily. That's not true.
I got you. All right. I doubt you're going to be able to talk about this a lot, but we saw a headline last week where the nurse got charged that worked inside that jail. Was that a contractor, or was that somebody who worked with the Intercounty Sheriff's Office?
That is a contractor. So when we built the new adult detention center, with the number of inmates that was expected to be there and the number of medical services that we knew we would need, we sought a contract company called WellPath Medical Services. Mm-hmm. They're a big corporation. They provide medical services to jails and correctional facilities all across this country. And so the nurse that was involved with that particular case was an employee of WellPath Medical Services, not the Henry County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. What did she do wrong?
Well, I can't go beyond the scope of what was
What's
already
the charge?
released. Involuntary manslaughter.
Right. It means she didn't do a responsibility, right? Is that?
Yeah, as we stated in the release, she did not perform the medical rounds and checks as required by contract, and in fact falsified the vital checks of him,
Wow.
which would have prevented deputies from taking him to the hospital to seek medical treatment had we known his vital signs were out of the normal.
All right. Here's a question I want to ask you. What have you learned from that process, from this? What can Colonel Wayne Davis do to keep that from happening again in the jail?
Well, as far as WellPath, we're looking at additional ways we can oversee medical staff moving forward. Is the biggest thing. There is essentially a separate entity operating inside the adult detention center.
Are you comfortable with that?
We're working on that.
Okay. All right.
Again, that part of it is kind of new to me, so
right.
I'm learning the
Fair
ins
enough.
and outs of that.
I appreciate when you do that.
Yeah.
There's no way, even if you've been there how many years you've been, that you could know everything there is to know about all this.
Well, these contractual obligations with WellPath are new to everyone.
Okay.
And so, this is a new service. Previous to that, when we were in the smaller jail,
Right.
we provided our own medical service as far as handing out medications and checking vital signs and things of that nature. So this is new to everyone,
Right.
and it's certainly new to me.
Right. I mean, I think you can admit that was a bad day for the jail. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. You had to look a little down on all that.
Sure. Anytime someone loses their life, especially loses their life and passes away inside a correctional facility, it's a tragic.
Right.
It's tragedy.
Right. If you're a sheriff, what can you do to keep that from happening? I mean, if somebody is still like they're not getting hurt, can they call you?
Absolutely. I've been giving my cell phone number out left and right, as I told you before. My goal is
I've got his cell phone number. Yeah.
to be the most transparent and visible sheriff ever.
All right.
Now, I'm not saying call me instead of 911, obviously.
Right,
If you
right.
have an emergency, call
Right.
911
right.
first.
Right. Now, let's talk about something that's kind of close to my heart, and that's the media relations, which haven't been good with the current sheriff, and I'm not going to blame you for that.
Right.
I promise you that, looking eye to eye to you. But I mean, at some point, we have to begin working together, and really, all I want is to be able. 'Cause one of the hardest things is to sit on this air, and not be able to tell the audience, we got a bad guy on the loose,
Right.
and you need to take cover, that kind of thing. And that's what I felt like. I felt at a real disadvantage with my audience to be able to be truthful with them, because after the election last year, I lost communication with the sheriff, and a lot of times I would just simply, really all I really want is a who, what, where, and when.
Sure.
And I think I hadn't asked for more than that.
No.
Yeah.
And so, as you know, I've served 7 years as the public information officer for the sheriff's office.
Right.
And I've never denied you information.
No.
In fact, I've had a great working relationship with Bob, as I told you earlier.
He said that last Thursday.
Yeah, he calls in to me regularly. We have
Right.
talks about different things. And Mark Childry on your Reedsville station.
Right.
I've communicated with him on numerous occasions. We've had a great working relationship as well.
What can you and I do to work better at this?
Move forward. I mean, there's no animosity from me to this station
Right.
or any other media outlet. I'm going to treat you equally and fairly like I would any other media
All right, let
outlet.
me ask you this, because one of the things your opponent says is he's willing to come up with policies on dealing with us.
Okay.
Is that something you can do?
Policy on dealing with the media?
Sure. Because what we need sometimes is just like a weekend. It's hard to communicate on a weekend, but still the same. Sometimes crazier things go on a weekend, as you well know.
Sure.
So sometimes we just like to be able to, because in the old days I could text the sheriff, and he would give me a little paragraph that big, but it would go a long way.
Sure.
In being able to tell the public what's going on. And that's really all I need. I don't need to know. I know you have to do investigations. One of the things I know, if there's a bank robbery, you never want to give out the amount that was stolen, because that's a key part of the court proceeding. I get that. You know.
Sure.
And I'll always go where they say stand. If you say stand behind this tape on this rock, I'll do it. So that's all I need.
Right.
Yeah.
And moving forward, you'll be treated
right.
equally and fairly like any other media outlet.
Can I start communicating with you now?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And as public information officer, I've always been available on the weekends. I've never denied any media outlet information or access just because it was a weekend.
But will you be honest and say that Star News is not the only media that's got problems? I mean, there isn't. There's. I don't want to mention names right now and everything, but there's other media that feel like they haven't been treated fairly. I mean, it's not perfect.
What I would say is, moving forward, you all be treated fairly, and I'll be available to all of you.
Good enough. All right, we're going to take a commercial break. What's a question I hadn't asked you on this session that you'd like me to ask you?
You've asked a lot of questions so far, Charles.
Right. So. Right. I mean, I know there's something I hadn't touched on that you want to touch on. What is something you want to touch on?
I don't know. We can think about that on the commercial break.
All right. Okay. All right, folks. What a great interview this is. Colonel Wayne Davis on the show. Is that a new rank?
It is a new rank.
Yeah.
So essentially, I am the chief deputy. That is not a new rank. We just changed the.
If the sheriff's out of town, are you in charge?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good enough. All right, folks. We'll take a commercial break and we'll be right back. You watch the Star News. Awesome.
Ooh, that's a lot of talking.
Huh?
That's a lot of talking, Charles.